What if the cheapest acre isn't the smartest one? Every week, thousands of people scroll through listings that look perfect on paper. The photos are clean, the land looks flat, the price feels like a miracle. And yet, the moment you actually step onto that dirt, the truth shows up fast. So here's the real question. How many of those amazing deals would still look amazing if you could see everything the listing is hiding before you buy? By the end of this video, you'll know the difference between a low price and real value. You'll see the 7 checks every buyer needs to run, the ones that protect you from red flags you won't see in the listing photos. And you'll discover the 5 states where off-grid land in 2025 still offers space, freedom, and a price that stays honest after you buy it. This is Off-Grid USA, and here is the breaking point. Most people who dream about going off-grid start with the same idea. I just need land, something cheap, something quiet. But here's the part nobody tells you. Cheap land is the easiest thing to find, and the easiest thing to regret. Listings always look perfect. The trees are always green, the land is always flat, the access road is right there somewhere. And the price? The price looks like destiny. But land always reveals its real cost after you buy it. That's why so many people fall in love with the wrong acre. Not because they're careless, but because nobody taught them what actually makes land livable, what keeps cheap from becoming surprise. Because before you choose a state, a county, or even a single acre, you need to know what can blow the whole plan apart. These are the red flags people never see coming. So, what is the first red flag? It's simple. The road. Because when land is extremely cheap, the road is usually not a road at all. It's just 2 old tire tracks someone forgot to delete from satellite images, and buyers don't realize it until their first attempt to drive in feels more like a rescue mission than a property tour. Listings always try to make it sound like something real. They'll throw in lines like road nearby, easily accessible, or path to property. And every one of those phrases is basically seller language for you can try, but don't blame us if the forest wins. They know it sounds harmless, and they know most people won't question it until it's too late. Here's the part nobody says out loud. If the county doesn't maintain that road, then weather does, and weather is the worst maintenance crew on Earth. All it takes is one storm for your access to turn into a mud trench, a winter trap, or a set of ruts so deep they look like archaeological evidence of the last person who tried this lifestyle. This is why road access becomes red flag number 1. Not because roads are exciting, they're not, but because this is the easiest thing for sellers to hide behind pretty photos, nice angles, and painfully optimistic vocabulary. People buy cheap land thinking the road is rough but manageable, and then one good rain turns it into a slip and slide with a property tax bill attached to the end of it. And if the description sounds more confident than the road itself, then you already know where this story goes. You're not buying an off-grid escape, you're buying a scavenger hunt with no prize. Water is red flag number 2. And it shows up this early because it's the one thing sellers consistently hide behind vague descriptions that sound harmless until you actually need water to live. They'll throw in lines like seasonal creek or good potential or the classic buyer to verify, which is basically their polite way of telling you they never checked anything, they don't plan to check anything, and they're hoping you only realize that after you've already paid. The real problem is how unpredictable water is across the rural West. In some areas, you can drill a well and hit decent water at 150 feet, while just a few miles away, you can keep drilling past 700 feet, watching the price climb from uncomfortable to tragic in real time. People buy cheap land thinking they'll figure out water later, and then they get the quotes. $20,000 to $40,000 for drilling, plus a few more thousand for a pump system, and suddenly their affordable acreage costs more than a decent used truck. And this is exactly why water sits at red flag number 2. Without a reliable source, you're not off-grid. You're not homesteading. You're not living sustainably. You're just camping with optimism and a growing stack of receipts. So if the listing spends more time talking about the view than the water situation, it's because the view is probably the only thing they're sure you'll actually get. Seasonal conditions are red flag number 3, and they matter because this is the part of off-grid living most buyers never see coming. Road access is about whether a road exists at all. But seasonal conditions are about how the land behaves once the weather stops acting friendly. And that difference is what turns a great property in July into a completely different world by November. Sellers never show this in the listing. They'll take the photos in the 1 month where everything looks stable, dry, and harmless, and then hide the reality behind phrases like dry most of the year, seasonal access, or may require 4x4 during certain months. That's just their way of saying the place transforms the moment the seasons shift. The driveway floods in spring, the ground turns into soup during mud season, and the first winter storm builds a snow wall tall enough to qualify as a landmark. And this is why it becomes red flag number 3 so early, because seasonal extremes don't just make life inconvenient, they decide if the land is usable at all. I've seen properties with a legitimate county-maintained road still become unreachable for weeks because the terrain around it collapses into mud, ice, or runoff the moment the weather feels dramatic. If the listing only shows blue skies and summer grass, it's because the other seasons would end the sale on the spot. Seasonal conditions don't care about your plans. They decide whether the property is a home or a part-time experiment. HOAs are red flag number 4, and they show up here because nothing destroys the off-grid dream faster than discovering you traded city rules for rural rules with better views. Sellers rarely highlight it, but if the land sits inside an HOA, you're not buying freedom, you're buying a boundary wrapped in paperwork. They'll advertise it as community standards, shared resources, or the classic light restrictions, which usually means someone you've never met now gets to decide what you can build, where you can park, how many animals you can own, and whether your cabin matches the aesthetic. Some HOAs even ban RV living, tiny homes, solar setups, chickens, or anything that makes off-grid life off-grid. This becomes red flag number 4 because people move to the countryside to leave control behind, and an HOA is just control with a nicer logo. If the listing mentions community guidelines, read it twice, because the only thing worse than the city telling you how to live is paying extra for the privilege somewhere rural. Buyer to verify is red flag number 5, and it's the moment every listing stops talking and quietly hands you a bag of unknown problems. Because when a seller writes buyer to verify, what they really mean is, we don't know, we didn't check, and we're making it your responsibility so it's not our fault later. It shows up everywhere: water, zoning, utilities, access, even property boundaries. And people underestimate how dangerous those 3 words are. In the off-grid world, buyer to verify can mean the road isn't maintained, the well depth is a guess, the zoning is restrictive, the power line is theoretical, or the property line is drawn by whoever had the steadiest hand that day. This hits as red flag number 5 because it's not a single problem. It's a warning label for every problem you haven't discovered yet. If the listing uses buyer to verify more than once, it's not transparency. It's a confession that you're about to do all the homework after you've already bought the test. And that's the thing about these red flags. They're never obvious when you're excited about the view or the price, but they're always the first reality check once you're standing on the land wondering why nobody mentioned any of this before. Out here, the land itself isn't your enemy. It's the details you didn't verify that end up costing you the most. There was a guy in northern Arizona who bought 8 acres because the listing sounded perfect. Blue skies, big views, and that magical line sellers love. Easy access, good water potential. By winter, the road washed out, the seasonal creek vanished. The HOA sent him a warning about his unapproved structure, and his well quote came back higher than the truck he arrived in. He didn't step into off-grid freedom, he stepped straight into a masterclass on why these red flags always show up before the dream does. After hearing that story, the next thought is the obvious one. Okay, so how do I make sure this doesn't happen to me? That's exactly where the 7 checks come in. They're not there to scare you or eliminate every property. They're the simple steps that show you the truth before you spend $1. Once you run a piece of land through these checks, you'll know exactly what's solid, what needs work, and what the real cost of living there will be. Check number 1 is the road. Not the pretty version from the listing, but the real one. Now that you've seen how easy it is for sellers to hide the problems, this check is about confirming 2 simple things. Can you legally reach the land, and who keeps that road alive once the weather turns ugly? The first part is easy. You make sure the road is officially recorded, not just a path someone has been using for years out of habit. If it's not documented, it doesn't exist, at least not in a way that protects you. The second part is knowing whether the county maintains it or if you're the maintenance crew. A county-maintained road stays open after storms, gets plowed in winter, and doesn't disappear into mud every spring. A private or unmaintained road might still be usable, but only if you're ready to budget for gravel, grading, or even hiring someone with a machine to fix it after a bad season. This check isn't about eliminating land. It's about understanding the true cost of reaching it. Once you know who keeps that road alive, you know exactly what kind of commitment you're buying. Check number 2 is water. Not the dream of water, not the potential, not the line in the listing that sounds hopeful, but the actual physical source you're going to depend on every single day. This check is simple. You confirm where the water comes from, how reliable it is, and what it will cost you if it's not already there. If the property has an existing well, you get the depth, the flow rate, and the test results. No numbers means no certainty. And if there's no well yet, you talk to local drillers and get real quotes for that exact area. Because 150 feet and cheap in one county can turn into 600 feet and painful 3 miles down the road. The point isn't to run away from land without water. It's to know the real price of creating a water source before you buy it. Some properties stay affordable even with drilling costs, and others become a money trap the moment the quote arrives. This check simply tells you which one you're standing on. Check number 3 is the soil, because the ground you're standing on decides far more than people realize. This isn't about having nice dirt. It's about confirming whether the land can actually support a driveway, a structure, a septic system, and anything you plan to grow. So this check is simple. You make sure the soil isn't the hidden problem that turns every project into a battle. You start with the basics. Does the soil drain well? Or does it hold water like a sponge after every storm? Clay-heavy land can shift, crack foundations, and trap water. Sandy soil can erode faster than you expect, and rocky terrain might look rugged and beautiful, but it can turn even simple digging into a full-blown excavation bill. Then comes the practical part. If you plan to install septic, you check whether the soil perks, because if it doesn't, the county won't approve anything until you spend money on engineered systems that cost more than most off-grid cabins. And if you're thinking about gardening or small-scale homesteading, you check whether anything actually grows there without needing a chemistry degree. This check doesn't eliminate land, it just tells you what you're really working with. Good soil saves money. Difficult soil can still work as long as you know the cost before you buy. And once you understand what's under your feet, you can plan your entire off-grid setup with real numbers instead of wishful thinking. Check number 4 is the slope, because even if the land looks perfect in photos, the angle of the ground decides how hard it will be to turn that property into a real home. This check is simple. You want to know whether there's a flat, stable area big enough for a cabin, a driveway, and whatever else you plan to add later, or if every step of the project will require heavy machinery and extra money. You start by walking the land and asking one question. Could I actually build here without moving half the hill? A gentle slope is usually fine. It helps with drainage and can even make the place feel more private. But if the land drops off sharply, rises too fast, or feels like you're walking a ski run, you're looking at grading, retaining walls, and access problems the listing never mentioned. This check doesn't tell you to avoid sloped land, it just tells you how much work and money that slope will add to the project so you know whether the property still fits your budget or secretly doubles it. Check number 5 is power. Not because you need the grid to live off-grid, but because you need to know exactly what your options cost before you commit to anything. This check is simple. You confirm how you're actually going to power your life and what it takes to make that plan work on this specific piece of land. Most people assume solar will solve everything, but solar only works if the property gets real sunlight year-round and doesn't sit under heavy tree cover or behind a slope that blocks winter sun. If you're considering generators or hybrid setups, you check fuel access, noise rules, and how much backup you realistically need during long stretches of cloudy weather. Once you understand the cost and the setup required, you can decide whether the property fits your off-grid plan or quietly makes it more expensive than you expected. Check number 6 is zoning and building rules, because no matter how good the land looks, the county still decides what you can actually do on it. This check is about confirming, before anything else, whether your off-grid plan matches the rules written for that specific parcel, not the general area, and definitely not what the seller thinks is allowed. You start by pulling the zoning code for that exact property and reading what's permitted for full-time living. Some zones allow cabins, tiny homes, RVs, and alternative systems without a fight, but others require foundations, engineered septic, minimum square footage, or a full inspection process that can turn a simple project into something much bigger. Then you look at the building requirements, what permits you need, which systems the county accepts, and whether your setup, solar, composting, rainwater, wood heat, is something they actually approve or something they politely ban. Counties vary wildly, and one small rule can be the difference between the property that works and the property you can only visit. This check isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to make sure the land gives you the freedom you think you're buying. Check number 7 is maps and hazards. Because before you fall in love with a piece of land, you should know exactly what's around it, under it, and running through it. This check is simple. You use maps to see the realities the listing doesn't show, the things you can't spot in a quick visit or a pretty drone photo. You start with the basics: flood maps, wildfire risk layers, elevation lines, and property boundaries. But the maps don't lie. They show you where trouble has already happened and where it's likely to happen again. Boundary maps confirm whether fences match the real lines, and utility layers tell you if there are easements, underground lines, or restrictions you wouldn't know about until construction day. This check isn't about avoiding land with quirks. Every rural property has something. It's about seeing the whole picture so you know what you're actually buying. So the next question is the one everyone eventually hits. Where does this actually work? Because some states make off-grid life a constant uphill battle, and others give you a head start before you even step on the land. And that's what this ranking shows, not the cheapest places or the trendiest ones, but the states where the land, the rules, and the terrain line up in a way that actually supports an off-grid life instead of fighting it.
Number 5, Arizona. Arizona lands in 5th place because sunlight, terrain, and power options work almost effortlessly, and most parcels offer gentle slopes that make building much easier than people expect. It's predictable land as long as you stay in the right counties and don't push too deep into the desert. Arizona's strongest checks are slope, soil, and power, and if you're choosing land here, the one thing you absolutely need to look at first is water, because well depth and availability are the biggest variables in the entire state. Number 4, Missouri. Missouri takes the 4th spot because wells are usually shallow, the soil works for both septic and small gardens, and rural roads tend to stay reliable through most of the year. It's one of the easiest places to get a basic homestead running without complicated engineering or heavy machinery. Its strongest checks are water, soil, and road, and the main thing to watch is seasonal terrain because storms and clay pockets can turn low spots into mud traps if you choose the wrong elevation. Number 3, Maine earns the 3rd spot thanks to reliable water, endless forest resources, and rural counties that stay surprisingly relaxed about zoning and building. The terrain is predictable as long as you choose the right elevation and avoid pockets that freeze hard in winter. Its strongest checks are water, zoning, and maps and hazards, and the check you need to watch closely is slope combined with winter access because snow changes everything if your driveway isn't positioned or graded correctly. Number 2, Tennessee. Tennessee stands at number 2 because it consistently performs across almost all the checks. Roads are reliable, zoning is flexible, wells are shallow and affordable, and the soil usually accepts septic without expensive upgrades. Power is also easy to set up, whether you choose grid or solar. Its strongest checks are road, water, soil, and zoning, and the check you need to pay attention to is growth pressure, because some counties are getting busy fast and prices follow the crowd. Number 1, Idaho. Idaho takes the top spot because it offers one of the cleanest combinations of the 7 checks: workable slopes, reliable water in many regions, flexible zoning, predictable terrain, and enough sunlight for solid power setups when you pick the right orientation. Even rural road access is more consistent than people expect if you stay out of the extreme backcountry. Its strongest checks are slope, zoning, maps, water, and power. And the one thing you need to look at carefully is road distance, because the freedom isn't the problem. The remoteness can be if you push too far from maintained routes.
If you made it this far, you already know more than most people who jump into cheap land blind. And if this helped you understand your own search a little better, then do the simplest thing you can for this channel: hit like. It tells the algorithm that videos like this actually matter, and it lets us keep building guides that save people real money in the real world.